So when you see my screen, can someone give me a thumbs up? All right. And then I do see we have one new member with us this morning, Miss Jane Richardson. If you could just introduce yourself to our group here.
I think I'm in the wrong group, so I'm texting Natalie now to find out. I'm the early childhood coordinator for pre-K. So usually
Okay, yes.
I don't know how I bounced into here. So I'm trying. I'll listen till I can get to my.
You should be here though, Jane.
Yeah,
You should
I'd
be
love to be with you guys.
Because
we want you to stay.
So,
Well, welcome to the financial management team this morning. That's why I had our theme music this morning about money. I forgot it on Monday, but I had to get back to our theme music each morning. So, so with our workbook on the shared screen now, you'll see in the top the core area summary. We kind of discussed about 7 different things in what we believe our students, staff, and families should expect regardless of the model, whether virtual or hybrid. So I've kind of taken those and made them into bullet points and tried to stay under the limit of 5 that they have here. So 1, prioritize the health and safety of students and staff. Meal distribution, we discussed. The social, emotional, and academic learning. So obviously we had on there the education and the social, emotional support for students. And then some of the other things that we had that I put in parentheses here to ensure, CO, social and emotional academic learning, we need to ensure adequate staffing, professional learning for staff, technology access, support, and then equitable services across ACPS. And all of these things have to keep in mind what the goals we're looking for, because adequate staff means something quite different if our goals are different. Same thing for technology access and professional learning for staff. The goals would determine the level of professional learning that we might need, or technology and so forth. So for instance, if we want everybody to have their own individual internet capable device, that would be quite different than if we want to ensure that everybody has internet access, right? Because everybody doesn't technically need to have a router or a hotspot to get internet access. We could potentially do a mobile hotspot to provide internet access in different communities. So that's just what I'm trying to get at there. And then the last thing we had that Kurt and Krishna mentioned was the transparency and communication. We need to make sure that there's standard communication for the division that goes out, and we need to have it in multiple languages. So all of our families and staff are informed about things going on in the school division. So that's what we kind of got through on Monday. The other item was, how does the financial management team support the hybrid and the virtual model? I took a stab at this last night. Again, 1 to 2 sentences here. So what I believe our group, how we're going to support either model is that we're going to provide the financial oversight to ensure adequate funding is available and that the budget isn't exceeded. Regardless of the model, that's what I see this group as doing. We need to make sure that people have funding to do the different things that they need to do. Sorry, I'm admitting a couple people into the room right now. And then we also have to make sure that we don't exceed the budget because once the money runs out, we don't have any money to do anything else. And as most of you might know, if you don't, the funding could drastically change as we go through the school year. A large portion of our revenue is based on state sales tax revenue, the revenue in the city, and so forth. So we definitely have to monitor the spending versus the revenue that the school system is receiving. So just because right now our budget says we're going to have $200 million in revenue, If the numbers start coming in lower than that, we have to revise that. So again, the way I saw it is we'd provide that financial oversight, ensure adequate funding is available, and ensure that we don't exceed our budget. I'd like to open it up for a little discussion on these two areas before we go on to the confirming the key decision. I see Lisa with her hand up.
Thank you, Dominic. So my first question is, we spoke about the idea of looking at our school budgets or some of the accounts as just one, or just making sure that we're looking at the schools as a whole and not just individually, because for some of these like factors, I mean, we're gonna have to be supporting each other, and it's gonna apply to all schools. I don't know if it's because I'm just looking at this. I don't know if we are gonna continue or if we agree on that messaging as a group.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's down in the key decisions. So once we move down into the key decisions, we'll see, for instance, will required items be purchased centrally, you know, i.e. PPE, technology devices, screening equipment. Will that be purchased centrally? So therefore we have to move funding around centrally to purchase that. There's great reasons for potentially wanting to purchase those things centrally, such as purchasing power. The more we buy, the deeper the discount we might get on some of these items. So instead of each individual school purchasing it, we might want to do it as a school division. And with that, you know, funding would have to then be moved out of the schools into the central office, whatever department, whether it's tech services or facilities, to purchase those things. Also on here, we have what major objects will be subject to increases, what major objects will be subject to decreases. And when I say major object, that's kind of a budgeting term. So we have different object codes throughout ACPS, such as office supplies, capital equipment replacement, capital equipment additional, so forth and so forth. So we can look across the entire ACPS and say which one of these items, depending on the model we go with, hybrid or virtual, which areas would be subject to a decrease. And then also, I think Perrette mentioned in one of our first meetings, would these decreases be equal across ACPS? For instance, all schools are going to receive a 30% reduction to their supplemental funding. So then principals can decide what the stipends would be. Like, are they still going to have department heads or grade heads, or are we going to do bus duty stipends and so forth, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll go into that in a little bit, Lisa, the key decisions. Once we just kind of finalize what we feel like should be the standards across both models and what we believe the financial management group should be doing. So I'm there with you.
The second part of my comment or question was that what you just said, and is that I'm looking at the factors at the first part of and when I was listening to the presenters and listening to you, is like all these 5 components here apply to both, to hybrid or virtual. So I just as a team member or like a member of this team, I just want to feel comfortable with whatever we prioritize is gonna be able to be applied to both, regardless. Like these are just, you know, kind of like principles that things that need to be in place for the model, regardless the model. Like this is important for the operations of the schools, regardless the model that we follow. So that's all I wanted to say, that I think that we kind of like have the main things here that are important for the schools and for this process to be successful. I think that we all just, I don't see the professional development though, that we also talked about that, like that's a big one. I don't know what Perrette thinks, what the rest of the group, but I think that that's important just to include it. Oh, okay, professional learning.
So
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's under the social, emotional, academic learning piece, that to be able to provide SEAL, we're gonna need professional learning.
Dominic, this is Alex. I raised my hand, but we don't have John Kreitz here, but he raised something in the last discussion about what the data is telling us. And he said, from his perspective, we really should think about the online learning.
Alex,
Yep.
Alex, hold on. So we're going to get to what the data is telling us once we get through some of these other items. So again, what we're working on first is what are the things that are going to be the standard across ACPS, no matter the model. Then
Right,
we're going
and
to
that's
go
the point I want to highlight. His point was on the online, his assumption is that online learning model applies to hybrid model
Alex,
100%.
Hold on, Alex, hold on. So we're going to go into what the data is telling us at the end. So we first had to focus on the financial management group and what we believe should be the things across all models, and then how the financial management team is then going to support both models, the hybrid or the virtual. And then we're going to confirm our key decisions. And then at the end, we're going to talk about what the data is telling us. So I want to be able to go back to what the data is telling us from our smaller 4 or 5 person groups at the end. But we have some tasks that we have to accomplish for Dr. Hutchins and Dr. Mozingo, so then that they can take this information and do the cross-pollination. And Anne-Marie, I see you have your hand up, but I think there's one person in front of you. Again, it's hard for me to see body raising their hands. I saw someone else raise their hand, but if you can just take yourself off of mute and go ahead.
Me?
Sure, go ahead, Anne.
Oh, okay. One of the things that is going to be important in both types of learning is online, the apps, things like that. I know a lot of places were giving teachers and schools free apps or whatnot for, sorry, I have a trash truck going by. You know, a lot of them were saying, oh, well, you can use this for free until June 30, 20 something. So we really have to look at, if we are going to do the online thing, we need to have monies for the schools to get those if they're not going to be given free again. An example, the librarian, she had so many great ones that we were able to, tumble books, things like that. We were also, able to do a lot of other apps, and that would also benefit both. So
yeah, so I definitely think to support SEAL, the technology access and support is definitely going to be a huge key under both models, whether it's hybrid or virtual, because even in the hybrid option, we're still going to have online learning. So we're going to need, tech services to look into what are going to be the best apps or learning devices that we can push out and train staff on using in the online portion. So we have that underneath the SEAL section, so technology access and support. So I definitely agree with you there, Anne-Marie, for sure. That's going to be huge.
And also I was thinking if it was for the whole school, it wouldn't feel like each principal had to pick and choose. It would be a whole school. And also that works with technology. I know we had such a problem this spring. Special ed had different, apps than the school did. And we just need to all be on the same page so they can all be able to help, when needed. So thanks.
Hey, Dominic, I see Lisa and Alex still have their hand up on the Zoom app. Oh.
Was there any other comments on what should be consistent across the models, or are we good with these 4 things that we believe should be consistent across all models? Hearing nobody, I'll move to the how will the financial management team support each model. So my first stab at this was to provide the financial oversight to ensure adequate funding is available and the budget isn't exceeded. We may need to wordsmith that a little bit, but does anybody else have anything that they believe we should be doing as a team to ensure that each model is successful. Again, it could be different. We could be doing something completely different under the hybrid model versus the virtual model. I'm just trying to create a statement to get the message out that our team isn't going to be doing the cost modeling for everything. We're not going to be managing individual budgets. For instance, we're not going to be telling a principal, you know, how to use their budget, the things that they should be buying. We're not going to be telling directors how to do that. You know, those things are still on them, right? A principal should spend their money how they best see fit to educate the students in their school. That shouldn't be coming from our cross-functional team. But we should be having standards for how we're going to make money available to directors and principals to get what they need to get based on the model. I see Lisa raised her hand, and I think one other person, Michael Covington. So we got Lisa, Michael, then Shelley, and then Anne Marie.
So from my perspective as a school principal, when finance tells me these are the priorities and this is what we are gonna be looking into when we are like overseeing, you know, how we are spending the money, that is a clear message to me that's the focus. So I think that when you said how can we just make sure that's there, it's just like it's making, these are the priorities. And like you said, you guys are not micromanaging schools, you guys are not micromanaging how we are gonna like do that with our budgets, but if we have this listed as the priorities, I think that that's a very clear message for school leaders. And again, I'm talking from my perspective as a school principal with a budget of the largest elementary school. Like that guidance really helps me to know how I'm gonna start those conversations with my staff and with you guys.
So to that end, Lisa, would one of the other things that our team be looking to do is to set the ACPS budget priorities? That's something that we do every fall with the school board anyway. So am I understanding that you would like us to, once we have those priorities from the school board, to, you know, push those out to everybody so everybody's aware, so they can understand how they should be spending their individual budgets? Is that?
I thought you were saying more along the line of this planning process, that whether it's the hybrid or the virtual model, that whatever priority we determine moving forward, that's the communication, not necessarily the school board's priorities, but the priorities for this particular process.
Correct.
Okay, so then our group should be providing recommendations around what we believe the budget priorities are. Because again, our group is supposed to be providing recommendations to the superintendent and the school board, and then they ultimately make the final decision. So I just want to make sure that I have it correct, Lisa, that our group should be making the recommendation about what the priorities are, so then that can guide principals and directors in where they should be spending their money.
I would say
Yeah.
based on the data. I'm sorry, just go ahead. I thought that was question first.
No, so Dominic, if I could add, one of the best things that you did towards the end of the school year last year is you basically told principals, this is what you can do and this is what you cannot do. This is your spending limit. These are your priorities. It was clear, there was no flexibility, and I think everybody was afraid to do anything outside of what you clearly stated. And so I think because we have to be so very budget conscious, and because we have to be mindful that things are so very uncertain, the more clarity you can provide for principals and the less flexibility you can provide for principals until we have a better understanding of what the year is going to look like, the better. I'd rather us be very conservative in the beginning and then be more flexible later in the year than to give principals flexibility early on and then we're struggling to bring things together later.
Okay. So I definitely think that goes into the financial oversight piece on setting. It has some of our key decisions below kind of talk about that. So are we going to have restrictions around spending? How are we going to treat one-time expenditures versus ongoing expenditures? For instance, if we start in a virtual model, we want to make sure that we're not spending all of our money on one-time technology devices because eventually we're going to transition back to on-site and we're going to need funding for on-site stuff. So I think we can definitely do that. And when we get to the key decisions, that'll kind of help us determine the financial oversight, what policies or what practices we want to put in place for the start of the school year or for the reopening of school. We can, as we move through this process, we can definitely talk about that. So I think that's where I'm going with the financial oversight. We have to have the financial oversight because we can't run out of money. If we run out of money in the first quarter, we'd be up the creek for the last 3 quarters. So I think the next one in line was Michael, then Shelley, then Anne Marie.
Thanks, Dominic. I withdrew my hand. I think my comment was really a further discussion or drill down on the financial oversight. That my thought was in providing that financial oversight, it may be a time to consider the financial control aspect within our accounting system or within Munis to allow departmental control rather than line item control to give more flexibility in a time where you really need to be able to change on a dime. But I don't think it needs to, I don't think it needs to be here as a top level. That's just sort of a further discussion of that topic. But
definitely, I think that'll definitely be a part of the weeds that the accounting and budget office gets into once we set what the financial oversight will be for the reopening. So appreciate that comment. And once this group kind of determines what some of the decisions will be, then our 2 offices can determine the spending control levels in Munis. So again, I think we're good on the 4 things that should be the same across all models. I think we have some type of agreement on what the financial management group should be doing. I think next in line was Shelley.
Good morning, everyone. So my comment is towards how we can be successful in either hybrids. This is a given, but it's continued support from financial services, may be updating our documentations, like providing tutorials that will help users and be very transparent on the steps, updating manuals. So I know we changed how we submit like P cards or timesheets, so maybe providing manuals and posting that on, Canvas, or even emailing it out to end users. It goes to communication as well. Again, like posting information on our website, Canvas, etc., providing emails to keep users informed or school departments informed of anything that's potentially changing, just so everyone's on the same page and not surprised at what's coming in the days, weeks, months. Reachability. This was a question I had, but I know we're reachable via email, but how do we get those who don't have internet? How do they contact us? Like, if they call us, are phone calls being forwarded somewhere where they can speak to someone?
Yep.
And then
so just real quick,
yep.
Can can I address those 2 points right quick? So on the documents, like for the finance documents to help people with their own individual financial management throughout the course of the reopening and then the entire academic year, that was on one of the key decisions. So I took it off of the key decisions as that's something that the budget and accounting office can work internally. I think for this group, what things would be useful in those, for instance, if we do a monthly financial checkup, right now we do that, but it's at the request of a principal or a director. But if we want to make it a standard thing that we're going to provide a monthly checkup or we're going to provide different documents online for people to access, I think this group, what we could use this group for is helping us understand what documents would be valuable, what things would be valuable in our agenda setting for those monthly meetings. Because right now we kind of discuss 3 things in those meetings, and that's the staffing, your year to date, and then we flag any areas that may be high spending at that point in time. So I agree with you there. There are definitely some internal things in the budget office that we can do to help individuals better manage their individual office or school budgets there, Shelley. The other piece was how do we get people help or support that don't have the internet? I think one of the key decisions that was listed was how do we answer phones in the offices if we're going to be in an all virtual model or even if some schools aren't closed. So again, I think that's important too. I had that under the key decision. So I reworded it to how will we handle front office support? So for instance, if schools are closed, are we going to do call forwarding? Are we going to have a call center that can handle calls that would be coming into individual schools or offices? So I definitely think that's something that has to be considered. I don't know if front office support is under financial management. I think we might want to flag that for either technology or human resources, because we definitely need to be providing support to people that still call in even when the school building is closed. So I'm right there, and I think you had a third point, but I just wanted to be able to address those 2 points first, because if I don't address it point by point, I might forget to address all of them at the end.
Thank you. Yeah, and I just had one more thing. Obviously, it doesn't have to be in the fall or anytime during the fiscal year, but a possible realignment of the budget to support schools and departments if they need it, especially if we're drawing out money from travel or whichever other accounts. They may need support into realigning their budget so they can spend accordingly for the remaining fiscal year.
Definitely in agreement there. I think we have agreement across the board there that this group needs to figure out which are going to be the major objects that would be subject to decreases depending on the model, and then which are the major objects that would be subject to the increases depending on the model. And then as Correct said in one of our earlier meetings, are we going to do a standard percentage across all of ACPS so it isn't viewed as we're taking more from one than another? Again, with the supplemental pay mentioned earlier, if we were to say that we're going to reduce supplemental pay by 30%, then that provides the principal still with the flexibility to decide which stipends that would be most beneficial in the hybrid or the virtual model. So yeah, fully agree. That's definitely under the key decision points. Before we move on to all of these, I think I saw Anne Marie with her hand up, and then I want to be able to move the conversation. We have about 17 more minutes to the key decisions, just to see if I've captured everybody's thoughts from what we previously talked about, and then to see if there's any other key decisions that the financial management team needs to understand. So Anne Marie.
Okay, I'm not sure if this is exactly the right place, but you're talking monthly checkups, and I think that's great. Materials for safety. Is ACPS going to provide them, or are schools going to provide them? I am concerned that it needs to not be the teachers. And teachers can barely get it for their own families. And also the liability of it, if we bring our own cleaning things or whatnot. So I think it's really important for us to put that in the budget and make sure that every school has what they need for that, so it doesn't lay on the teacher's shoulders. I don't know if that's right for now or.
Hold on.
And also materials sorry.
So as far as the PPE and the cleaning supplies and all that goes, so the health and safety. So one, we're not supposed to be bringing our own cleaning supplies into the building anyway. That's supposed to be done by the facilities. And then as far as will ACPS be providing that or not, I think the health and safety team are going to be deciding what's required. So once they decide what's required, I think our group's focus will be how will those items be purchased? Are each individual school or office going to be required to purchase these required items themselves, or will we purchase it centrally? So that's going to be a key decision for our group to provide a recommendation around. My initial thoughts are that the required, if ACPS, if the school division are saying certain PPE items are required, I think that they should be purchased centrally and then distributed out to the different schools. Again, there's lots of benefits to being able to purchase in bulk. So I think that could be our recommendation. I don't, if anybody else has different ideas. I know individual schools' budgets, their non-personnel dollars are not going to be enough to purchase all their own individual PPE and tech equipment and so forth. So I definitely agree with you there, Anne Marie, that that whatever is deemed required to have to come on site, we need to understand how ACPS would be providing that for sure.
Just one more thing. We're just talking about money also in cleaning. Are we going to have to up that budget? Because I would dare say that our cleaning department, our cleaning crews are overworked already. So will that add to our budget too?
So yes, when it comes to increasing the budget, so when it comes to cleaning, again, that's going to be the health and safety group, and they're going to have to determine the level of cleaning that has to be done. And then when it comes to supporting that with the dollars, that's where it comes into play of our group deciding which areas can we decrease, which major objects can we decrease, to then be able to free up additional funding to provide for the areas that we need to increase. So if the health and safety group determines that the required cleaning is going to need to increase and they need additional dollars to do that, we would need to be able to identify that funding. So if our group says, you know, these 10 major objects are areas that we can decrease if we are under the hybrid model, then we can basically pool that money as a contingency to then transfer money out of that and into the cleaning line or into the PPE line or whatever may be required to have people on site. So yeah, that's definitely.
Yep, that's good.
Hey, Dominic, I think Melanie had her hand up.
Yeah, Melanie and Robert, if we could go real quick, because we only have 12 minutes, and I wanted to just be able to walk through these key decisions, and then we'll have some homework leaving here. So Melanie?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I think I missed my shot earlier. I just wanted to kind of come in really quick from a procurement standpoint. Historically, a lot of the professional learning and workshops and trainings are sometimes procured like in piecemeal kind of throughout the fiscal year. And I think it's important that as it pertains to setting the priority budgets to kind of look at if we will be implementing or being a little bit more clear about how the budget is to be spent, that we kind of make sure that some of our schools know that a lot of the vendors, they like to send at a moment's notice trainings throughout the year. As far as budget is concerned, there may be something that may need to be looked at, especially if we're wanting to make sure that all the expenditures are kind of like at once, not being spent like all throughout the year. I feel like it would help us save a little bit more money if full services are purchased and not just kind of throughout the year. I don't know if that's helpful at all, but I just know historically I see trainings, at 4,000, 5,000, and that doesn't seem like much. It happens kind of throughout the year.
Got you. So on that, I think the HR team, so our human resource capital team, they're trying to put together a plan for training. So what types of training would be needed for staff throughout the course of the year, so there can be guidance across ACPS with what we should be pursuing there. So I think that will help with the funding of that professional development, because I think this year we're going to have to get away from the traditional trainings that we attend each year, and we might be doing completely different training in this year because, I don't know if all of our teachers were trained in an online environment. We might just have the traditional classroom training, so we might need that online environment. So where they may have went to a training in the past that specialized in-person teaching or emotional support, then we might need to change it to a online training. So appreciate that comment. I definitely think the professional learning that Lisa and Mariah definitely stressed on Monday, that is definitely going to be key to being successful across either model. So then I just want to transition into our key decisions with our last 10 minutes here. When you all get a chance, please, check out the workbook and see what the decisions are. I'll run through them pretty quickly just so everybody can have an idea of what they are. These have been items that people have put in, and then I added several as well. And then I tried to say whether they're not interdependent or interdependent. So the first one we have on here: will require items be purchased centrally, i.e. PPE, tech devices, so forth. How will underutilized contract staff be reassigned or compensated? For instance, if we're in a virtual model, we're not transporting people, so how could we potentially use bus drivers? The reassignment is probably more HR. The compensation is more us with payroll. How will employees' time and leave be managed? Both contract staff and casual staff. Again, that's going to be important for payroll. Are there restrictions on how schools departments are to spend their budget? What are the expectations? So I think this goes to Paret's point of providing clear guidance on how to use your budget and limiting the flexibility around the budget in the first quarter, perhaps. Next, how does this impact budget development for the following year? So this probably doesn't have an impact on the reopening, but it definitely is going to change depending on the model. If we're not in the offices and in the schools, we're going to have to, and by we, I mean the budget office is going to have to look at the process of developing the fiscal year 2022 budget. So it doesn't really have too much on the reopening, but it'll definitely change based on the reopening. How will we provide connectivity? Individual hotspot devices or mobile Wi-Fi vehicles? Again, that's probably under our technology, and we have technology as a part of our group, Mariah, Daniel, and Gary. So it's going to cost a lot more money to provide individual devices, but mobile Wi-Fi units might be a little more doable. How do we prioritize one-time expenditures versus ongoing expenditures? Again, as an example I used earlier, you know, if we start in a virtual model, we want to make sure that we're not spending all of our money on one-time tech infrastructure if that infrastructure is not going to be used once school reopens, because then we wouldn't have the funding for on-site. What, if any, financial support from the operating fund will school nutrition services need for meal distribution? There might be certain expenditures that they cannot use their school nutrition fund to pay, so they will need operating dollars. We need to figure that out. How do we handle the front office operations, phone calls, receiving mail? Do we create a centralized call center? And then the final ones we've kind of discussed a lot: which major objects are subject to increases, which major objects are subject to decreases, will decreases be equal across ACPS? And then lastly, how will substitutes be used? If we have any other ones, since we only have about 5 more minutes, if we have any other key decisions, if we could add those before tomorrow, 10 o'clock, 10 a.m., that would be great. And then we can review them. And then as I meet with the other chairs, that'll help in that conversation. I do want to be able to get to the data, how the data will help shape the decisions for the hybrid and virtual models. So I know Alex had a comment on there that John Kreitz shared earlier this morning. Alex, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, the John Kreitz was not really so much of the data as on the data takeaways are the following. Consolidated data needs to be approached with caution, that the analysis breakout on page 5 that was shared is really meaningful at student profile basis. So in other words, the responses for, what are the top drivers very well could change by the demographic. And the expectation around approaching it from a student family-centric approach to see how you establish equity in that space, and looking at the sort of, if you would, populations of students, because the way, and again, I know that's a consideration, but that was what the group had shared, is to approach the data and look at the pockets of data that are telling this story, because if we look at consolidated information, we may be drawing a different conclusion.
Right. I think this morning, before we broke out the education element, individuals directed us to not make inferences on the conclusions that the data are telling us, but rather use the data to just kind of help understand where people could possibly be thinking, and then understanding that this data is going to change as we go into next week and the following weeks and so forth and so forth. So yeah, definitely. I see Robert has his hand raised.
Yeah, just real quick, Dominic, you went through the key decision points, and I think that was under budget, but I just wanted to remind people that if you scroll through the workbook, there are other areas that we had key decision questions as well. So there's a payroll section, there's a procurement section. So just not to, stay on the budget, we do have other areas where we had some key decision questions that we had posed. So look through the workbook for those as well.
Right. So and I will say what I've done is I didn't break it out. So right now, all of the key decision points that I discussed here today, I just put underneath the budget section. But there's definitely payroll. We discussed payroll items under here. We discussed technology items under here. And we also discussed purchasing items under here. I just haven't split it out into the different sections right now. So for instance, right now, and I'm under the budget section, but I had the very first one is, will items be purchased centrally? I also have things about payroll under here as well. They're just not split out right now. again, time is limited. I see Lisa with their hand up, and then we'll go into just closing statements and just the homework. If you could just give me a couple more minutes. Lisa?
Yes, I mean, maybe you guys had a chance to look at the data that Clint showed today before we did. I'm wondering, is like, when we're looking at all these decisions, you know, like just to cross-reference with that piece of the data that had the priorities that families had or just perceived and the staff perceived, and just to make sure that that those are aligned, so we don't have pushback. That's all I'm saying. So I'm just like, maybe that's part of the homework that we all have to do, right?
Yeah, I definitely think it's a good idea for everybody to check out the information that Clint will be sending. We definitely did not get to see it in advance, Lisa. I was seeing it for the first time today with the rest of everybody else. Just from the glance that Clint showed us, it appeared that the top 5 items were very similar between staff and families. They might have been in different positions. For instance, one thing might have been 2 for families, and it might have been 4 for staff, but it looked like all of the top 5 things were the same between families and staff. So then just in closing, again, for homework, if we can just go through the workbook and look at the key decision points, add any other key decisions that you think that we should be making as a financial management group. Again, I want to make I want to distinguish between what the financial management group should be doing versus the other groups, because we're charged with something very specific, and the other groups are charged with something very specific as well. Again, as we stated at the beginning, what we're hoping to do is provide financial oversight and ensure that we don't exceed the budget. So keep that in mind when you're thinking of the key decisions. If there are items that you believe other groups should be making as key decisions, as Sima said this morning, highlighted red, so then that they can take that question and give it to whatever other group that it might be important for. So again, when it comes to financial oversight, the financial management team isn't going to decide how much cleaning is done or what PPE is required, but we are going to ensure that the funding is available to get the required PPE or do the required cleaning. So I just want to make that distinction for everybody here. So when we're thinking about key decisions, keep that in mind. Lisa, is your hand up again, or is that old? Okay. So then homework, go over the information that Clint sends out, take a look at the workbook under the key decisions. I think we had an agreement on what needs to be the same under either model. I think we had an agreement under what the financial management cross-functional planning team should be doing. And then once we fill out this bottom portion, we should be good to go. Again, if we could have that filled out by tomorrow, 10 a.m., I can then go through it and consolidate it, and then be prepared to have our recap meeting on Thursday with the other chairs as we prepare for next Monday for doing some cross-pollination and so forth. Are there any final questions? Are there any, if there could be one thing that you all want to get done in the next meeting, what could it be? Again, if I could just get a couple more minutes of your time, let me know, so then I can take that to the group as a whole, so that can be discussed. Mandeep, I see you with your hand up. If I could just get 5 more minutes, everybody, apologize for that.
Yeah, Dominic, quick question on this. Under the payroll section, I'm seeing the time and leave management. We will need guidelines for either scenario, whether it's all online, whether it's hybrid. A communication should be sent to managers and employees as to what the expectations are. And under that, of course, we have written and we are waiting what are the guidelines from HR will be. So I just want to know that, is this something which should be initiated separately as a discussion with HR, or is this something they will note from here and they will be preparing to provide us some guidelines so communication can happen at the right time?
So I think for us, from the payroll perspective, from the financial management group's perspective, we need to be saying, what's the information we need to ensure successful payroll? So we should be providing, do we need everybody to clock in? Do we just is it better for us to just pay everybody that's a contract staff, their contract salary without clocking in? So there are certain things that the payroll office should be saying is a must for a successful payroll. HR will work on what they need each individual employee to do, but we need to be able to provide some guidance there as a payroll team.
Okay, got it. Right.
HR should just be dictating to us everything that should happen. Is that clear?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. I saw Perrette with her hand raised.
Yes, since we're 2 weeks into this planning process, would it be able, could the other groups maybe give us some big ideas that they've talked about? I think it would help us kind of stay on the right track with what we're discussing. I would hate for us to get to the very end and we've had, all of these discussions and then they've had their discussions, and just to ensure alignment, maybe if we could just get a status of where they are, even if there's no final decision making, but just maybe some big ideas that have come out of their groups, if they could share those with us.
That's definitely, so I can talk to Dr. Mazingo on the future cross-pollination plans. Again, as they're project managing the reopening, I have to get the information from them on how we're going to do the cross-pollination. So I get information back from Dr. Mazingo and Dr. Hutchins. I'll definitely share that with the group. Just from the meetings that we've had with all the chairs, everybody's kind of in the same place. A few people are a couple of steps behind where we are, as they haven't gotten through section 2 of their workbook yet. I'll definitely see how the future cross-pollinations are going to work. And I think that the education elements are going to be, they're kind of taking all of the information from the workbooks and trying to take all of the key points and use it to help guide the reopening. For instance, if something comes out of safety and health or health and safety that says we have to provide 3 masks for everybody in ACPS, like they're taking that to say, okay, here are the things that we have to do. So for instance, the thing that's going to come out of our group is obvious that we have to stay within budget, without a doubt. So yes, I'll definitely get back to the group once we find out the future cross-pollination moments. Robert, your hand, and then we'll wrap up with Robert. I don't see anybody else with their hand up.
Just one real quick question regarding the homework assignment. Was it just to add any key decision questions, or did you want us to take a stab at identifying who owns the decision and possible listing information?
Yeah, so definitely take a look at that as well. If you're adding any new key decision points, please fill it out across the entire table. If you take a look at some of the key decision items that are up here and who should own it or information that we need to be able to answer that question, please go ahead and fill that in as well.
Okay, all right.
All right, seeing no other hands, I appreciate your time. I'll try to send out an email just with a reminder of those homework assignments and then where we're trying to go. Again, the information that comes out of the financial management team should be guiding the decisions around the oversight of our dollars. We can't make the decisions on PPE or cleaning or how many staff people we have or what are our HR policies going to be or anything like that, but we can make the decisions on the financial oversight aspect of reopening. So I appreciate everybody's time. Appreciate you all giving me an extra 10 minutes this morning. Please, if you have any questions, email myself or any of the subcommittee chairs. Again, those are Robert, Mariah, Michael, and Deanna for procurement. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thanks. Have a good day.
Thanks. Have a good day. Good meeting, Dominic.
Appreciate it.